To all those people whose content I've subscribed to and send me emails, I think the idea of a DM which limits the information to the thing that says, it's here, here's the web link, and click on it, is a significant improvement on sending me an email. I think it's a great model, by the way. Look, a lot of thoughts there. I think you've been a little bit harsh when we did say that yesterday was the international perspective, and a couple of the speakers in the first panel were in fact locals, and your colleagues on this panel are all local, even though Ian speaks with a funny voice. He does actually work at a New Zealand university. Geez, I'm an Australian. I talk about a funny voice. The interesting part I liked about your last piece there, Vincent, I just have to pick up on this, is that one about taking content to the world. There was a tweet about it in the course of the last session about rights management, about why we're focusing on how we buy content as opposed to how we sell content. And in the convergence review we had in Australia recently, when they were doing their terms of reference, they had a whole lot about how to guarantee local content for local consumption, but not a single mention about how to take Australian content to the world, which I just thought was a bit weird. Well, I mean, fascinating. Different perspectives, people who all actually are using broadband in different ways. The one I just wanted to pick up on first was the fact that at least two of the models really rely upon video to a degree, or mention video. Certainly Stuart's been using video for video CVs, etc. Video is potentially very important for doing some of the tourism promotion, but also David mentioned the difficulties he's had trying to engage, using video conferencing with others. Now, the question I've got to ask is, do you think the impediment with using video has been entirely due to the broadband speeds you experience here, or is there something else as well that needs to be fixed?
Well, I could start from just from the cost of generating video is not recouped in the kind of advertising support that we would get around it. And it's not for want of trying. I've tried lo-fi and I've tried hi-fi in terms of spend of video production. And it's easier for a corporate to justify it as a marketing expense, but for me, actually, I have to monetize all my content, and we're really struggling to justify the expense of having a video crew chase ambulances or create studio content. I know it sounds pathetic, but actually, the margins in niche publishing are tight.
Yeah, I was thinking of video conferencing as well. No. But that's an interesting point. I was going to ask a question earlier about to the Fairfax people, but they'd actually already sort of talked about it. How important is user-generated video now in the news cycle? And of course, not me. And how important it is in the news cycle, and then the significance of that is, which is how much has it improved? I mean, that actually brings us back to the Skype question. I don't know what's happening here, but I'm finding it extraordinary that in Australia, which prides itself on, I used to sell telecommunication services to television companies, and they used to lecture me about how the quality of the picture was so important to them. And now I see them using Skype sessions as newsfeed content. And, it's Skype as good as you and I are getting, and they're putting it up there on the TV screen.
From my experience with both those topics, is we've had good success with...
Microphone.
Is it dead? Okay. We've had good success with sharing our research online on things like YouTube, but because it's a synchronous experience and we have low production values, and our target audience is really technical people who want to engage us as a service provider, that's been very successful. But when it comes to having real-time conversations with people, one of the biggest challenges is the latency, and then the connectivity over the current Southern Cross cable is acceptable. One of the biggest challenges is if you're trying to do it from anywhere other than a major CBD centre with a fibre connection. So as soon as you're distributed from that hub and you've got people teleworking at home, they may be in rural areas because they've come to New Zealand for the lifestyle to work for us, they're really challenged to carry out a Skype conversation with a customer in Japan or a customer in America. And that's really about the infrastructure then.
Stuart, you were suggesting it wasn't just infrastructure. You made the comment about it needs to work like it's a telephone.
Yes, and I guess certainly our experience is difficulty with reliability. I know that some of that is happening offshore. That sometimes it's the connection offshore. It's not always the New Zealand end, but I guess, from our point of view, how do you track down where the problem is? I just know that I was talking to someone on Skype 2 days ago, and now from the same location I can't get through. And how does that's a problem when you're trying to deliver to a client. So,
Ian, how important is video in the tourism promotion?
Well, it's extremely important because, video is extremely important today in the terms of promotion, because when you're engaging with consumers, it's about entertainment and education. So video delivers that visualization.
Okay. I have more, but I'm sure there's questions from the panel, from the audience for the panel. Do I have a question for our friends here about driving SME demand? Gentleman over here. Oh. And then Bronwyn. I'll give you one this time, Bronwyn.
Well, I'm cheating here. I'm Godfrey Bridger. I'm a consultant too, a real one. I'm cheating here because this question really is directed at the Minister. I was surprised to hear all the great news, but the question arises in this panel as well. It's relevant. I was surprised to hear all the good news looking forward about what we're trying to do here in the new digital age, but there was no reference from her or from, I'd be interested in any of the other government bodies about the link to the Pacific, the single link we have to overseas. Now, we've heard the dependence on video and international and how isolated we are. We've only got 1.5 or maybe 2 links to the rest of the world, and it's not good enough. And yet we're investing a huge amount into the infrastructure of our country, and yet there doesn't seem to be much facilitation or focus to ensure that that vital part of the link is really working well, so that these people at the front don't have a complaint.
That's a comment. You want to say something?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think in relation to that, I think it's a challenging proposition at the moment. I don't really believe that link is being utilised the capably it could be, and I believe that a better infrastructure within New Zealand will help drive demand through that link, and obviously there are plans around other providers stepping in there to help out once that demand increases to deal with the price issues. My mention about latency with making international calls. I mean, if you are connected to the backbone, you generally have a pretty good experience. It's that as soon as you're on DSLAM and you're out on anywhere outside the major CBD, even in a major city, once you're in a suburb, that's when the challenges start to kick in.
It is an interesting piece of the fact of the way that broadband works or IP works, that you get latency's all additive every time you're converting. And as the comment was said yesterday, low latency means fibre. UFB will significantly change the latency at this end, and the Southern Cross is about as short a latency as you can get for a Trans-Pacific route, and it's your most direct route, and it's actually not full. It's about, anyone from Southern Cross here? I think it's currently at 10% of lit capacity, let alone what its full capacity is. So you're not short of bandwidth. One of your issues almost is that you're just not generating enough bandwidth to bring the per unit price of data down. The more data you generate, the cheaper the price it will be per bit. It's a really simple game. Bronwyn?
I guess one of the issues about the Southern Cross is it doesn't matter. I mean, a Concorde is still going to take longer to get to New Zealand than a 747, and that is one of the problems we've got. I'd like to talk to the gentleman second from my right, whose name I've forgotten. One of the issues that we've got is we do have a competitive advantage in developing applications, because we are probably one of the few places where we are actually looking at being able to transmit stuff as economically as possible because of that disadvantage of distance. I wondered if you were prepared to comment on that, given that we do always have to be conscious of the fact that we face those disadvantages, that it's not so much the whole volume of what we send, but compressing the very important amount of information into what we send, so we keep the static content close to where it needs to be and only keep the volatile component on that bit that needs to move. And I'm wondering what sort of areas we're looking at with that. It pertains also to the tourism issue. Do we have to actually host our booking at the B&B, or is actually a better use of aggregation onto aggregator sites that do the booking, and looking at more of those issues in order to provide a better experience to our vastly overseas clients? Because after all, the 4 million of us we have here only got limited capacity to buy. The content market is the other 6 or 7 billion people out there.
Okay. I couldn't agree more in terms of our particular challenge. David, by the way, we put files, static files, none of this dynamically hosted. If you're trying to serve up 100 million users in a couple of hours, you need to have static content on edge servers distributed all around the world, locally cached by ISPs everywhere. But it, in terms of how we deliver our solutions to our customers and to our end users, that's absolutely how we do it. But I guess we monitor what that means for customers all around the world, and we definitely see that at the moment New Zealand does lag. And it's a population density thing is another challenge. You go to somewhere like Tokyo, well, all of a sudden you've got a great infrastructure because your population density is so high. So there's plenty of challenges around it, but I think improving the experience so that it just kind of works out of the box by its very nature will help hopefully improve the usage of our international connection and hopefully drive down costs, and certainly potentially some competition in that space might help drive down costs too. Absolutely not. No, that's true. You've always got, you've got the speed of light as a definite restriction.
What?
We could come up with every excuse to not actually go ahead and build stuff, and it didn't stop Henry Ford from advancing every time with a different type of car, and other manufacturers using the pitted dirt roads that were being built across the world. And I think there's a push and pull thing going on here where we could build the perfect platform before we actually make applications, but there's got to be as much enthusiasm. And yesterday there was reference to sort of the 8 layers of what broadband could be. Well, how about we introduce a 9th layer, which is people using this stuff and building stuff on it, so that there's as much pressure coming from the demand side as there is from the supply side.
But compressing the data when you've got a pipe which is bigger than the capacity that you're using already saves you no money at all. Wait for the microphone.
I think the point I'm trying to make is that we've got different pressures that we've got here for our SMEs, depending on whether they're designing for the international market or the local market. It's also the issue about what we can do in New Zealand for designing from urban to rural applications, and it's also the ability that we've got to use that as well for the rest of the world, because the rest of the world also faces the issue about how they get, particularly moving to the cloud, fast interactive content moving in a real world when we're moving everything, not just moving the small bits, that we have to start thinking about that. And we in New Zealand have a head start for thinking about applications like that because we've been dealing with this issue for as long as the internet's existed.
I think you are talking about, you are specifically identifying a comparative advantage of New Zealand, which is because of your distance, you know some things about caching that other people don't. Yeah, and you should leverage from. I still. Oh wait. Any other questions from out here? Because I'm sure there are. One at the back here. And I saw a hand over there. Did I as well? Was there a hand over there? But the one at the back here first.
I'd just like to make an observation here.
Who are you?
Igor Portugal from Vodacom. We supply voice over IP systems to small and medium businesses, and we actually have to deal with the issue of bandwidth limitations on a daily basis. I'd like to sort of make an observation that the Southern Cross and our link to the rest of the world is actually not a problem. As people stated, they're only at about 10% of capacity. the latency is very acceptable for both voice and video, and it's actually latency is not an issue. Latency is not an issue neither at that level, nor is it an issue at the voice over IP level. You can actually hold a voice over IP conversation with up to 500 millisecond latency, or even 1 second latency, and the human ear will adapt to that voice over IP conversation over a satellite phone, and that's what people do over the satellite phone. The problem is the jitter, and what happens with jitter is the actual bandwidth that telecom provides us with ADSL connections are restricted down to the minimum of 24 kilobits per second. Their guarantee level, even on those ADSL connections that promise 15 megabits downloads, etc., when people run those speed tests, at the minimum level, it only gives you 24 kilobits per second. And this bandwidth availability going up and down is what makes the voice connections and a lot of video connections, any real-time connections go down. So our problem is that ADSL infrastructure, and what a lot of people don't also know is that the way that ADSL infrastructure has been architected in New Zealand, it all connects through a single ATM switch. Basically the whole country is dependent on one point of connection, not only to the rest of the world, but to our rest of the peers inside our country. So I just wanted to make the observation that I actually haven't seen a limitation on it.
I have a question for the panel that emerges from that. How many of you know what jitter is? You do. You know what jitter is?
I don't need to know.
You don't need to know.
But other people worry about that stuff.
You can kind of guess from the description there.
Yeah, we have to implement networking code. That's the only reason I know.
Sorry, yeah. No, well, the reason I raised that is because it was, it's one of those 4 variables that determines broadband that we talk about, but no one ever mentions. And yes, sometimes what people call latency is a jitter issue, which is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but jitter is the variability of the latency on a connection. Correct? Roughly correct? Of your sorry? The variability of your bandwidth. Yeah. But I think it has the effect on latency. But yeah, so it's how smoothly something will run, whereas jitter is, latency is just how slowly it will run. And the reason I asked the question then is because in this question which says, I've tried to establish a video conference, where is it failing is the thing that the consumer doesn't know, and they wind up blaming it on the things that they don't know they should be blaming it on, right? They blame it on, it's a Southern Cross issue, it's a this issue, it's a that issue. And I suspect that one of the great impediments to users in small business land is that they are just like Stuart. They don't want to know, or sorry, they don't know, and they're like Vincent, they don't think they should need to know. But if you go on and ring your service provider and say, why is this not working for you? They'll happily sit you down doing ping tests and a whole range of things. And I'm sitting there saying, why in this day and age is it not part of the inherent application that says, I'm a small businessman, I want to go to this screen that tells me, why isn't this working and what do I do about it? And I suppose I'm throwing that out as a challenge to the industry who'd like to see take-up, that these are your users who are saying you aren't providing us the things we need to make the service work. Sorry, long lecture. Someone else got a question out there? There must be another question out there. Is this the dreaded question? Oh dear.
My name is Michael Sutton. I'm an independent consultant working with Catalyst on futures. My question relates is to ask the panel to comment on the following point. There is a concept within the internet that's been running for a long time overseas, which is called multicasting. It's not broadcasting, but it enables you, as a provider of data, to be able to send one packet out, and the routers make decisions to clone those packets for live data as it flows through the network. Now, the current network that's being planned by Crown Fibre provides pseudo-line, which is point-to-point, and routed multi-point, which is IPTV. The international standards provide for multi-point to multi-point where everybody can talk to everybody, but we are not implementing this in this country at the moment. Now, as a provider of one-to-many and many-to-many services, are you concerned about the ability of being the most efficient that you can? In other words, if you've got a magazine to send out, you can just send one copy into the network and it automatically clones it to the 30,000 people who have subscribed to it. Because at the moment what they're building for you is a system which will require you to send 30,000 copies of that. So I would like to know whether you would like to see the Crown Fibre implement a multi-point to multi-point, multicast-enabled component, which is the third network. So there are two networks at the moment, pseudo-wire, normal internet services as we're used to, and IPTV, which is the second one, but not the multi-point to multi-point. So do you understand the capability of multicast, which is one packet of data then being cloned 30,000 times as it passes through the network till it finally reaches its destination? Would you like to see that level of efficiency in the internet in New Zealand? Do we understand?
Okay, your question's asked. David, did you follow it? Vincent, did you follow it? Sorry, more Vincent.
Well,
David
could I just
probably
ask
did.
for a clarification? Does it make a difference if your data is hosted in another part of the world, say California or...?
The answer is, in California, probably not. In Fiji, yes. Right?
All right.
But then you use unicast cache backup.
Yeah. And does it matter if it, for instance, is something like an app, a downloadable app, which presumably sits, well, let's say, for instance, we're using the Zinio platform for distributing our magazines in a tablet experience. They sit in a server at Zinio in California, and I'm assuming that they have this technology that you're talking about. They've got very fast servers that can deliver to any points of the globe within seconds. So I would assume that by relying on our international partners for distribution, we could make some global efficiencies by partnering with the right organisation. But if what you're saying is true for a domestic context and it doesn't cost me any more, it sounds cool. Let's do it.
I mean, in regard to our business, certainly for the local client applications, it makes a lot of sense. But obviously anything that we host is hosted in edge servers all around the world, so it doesn't strictly apply. But yeah, it could definitely have potential for a lot of the shared peer synchronous services we do and a lot of the shared collaboration apps we're building. So.
From my point of view, I guess, you know, it sounds like a nice to have. Once I can deliver a lesson into a classroom in South Korea, then the next step would be delivering it, cloning it, and delivering it all around the world. But right at the moment, I just want a real-time conversation with the rest of the world, with not too much jitter and not too much latency. Yeah.
Ian, do you have a view?
I'm not technically competent to answer the question.
Okay. Do we have any? Was there another question I saw there, or am I think I've come to the end of those. I mean, I actually think that the drivers for demand. Well, I think the session tells you the drivers for demand in small and medium enterprise are actually quite huge. These are the businesses that understand the opportunities that being able to do things via video conferencing, being able to do things by transferring content, really make a big difference. But I think the drivers, the impediments to these people isn't going to be the bandwidth itself. Once the bandwidth arrives, they're still going to need a lot of help to make sure that they're getting to use it properly. Is that a reasonable summary of the proposition?
Some of it's just, can put words in your mouth about the imagination, about what can you do with these tools. And so far the discussion has been around, both today but just in general, is around the technical aspects of the rollout of the UFB and the politics around that. I'm hoping really soon we can get to the stage where we're having conferences about the cool shit that we can do with this.
Vincent, I have a suggestion. Are you staying this afternoon?
I hope so.
Good. I have a suggestion for you. That, I think, does get us close enough to lunch that I'll actually let you go to lunch. It is now 1 o'clock. So I think it's... Someone tell me how long you got for lunch? You've got 45 minutes for lunch again today. So if you could please join me before you go to lunch in thanking once again an informative and excellent panel on SMEs.